it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing.
Yeah, and after this and Biden's kind of flub of an answer that we'll get back to in a bit, he spent all day today. He has spent all day trying to clarify his record on segregation. Watch this.
I heard and I listened to and I respect Senator Harris. But we all know that 30 seconds to 60 seconds on a campaign debate exchange can't do justice to a lifetime committed to civil rights. I want to be absolutely clear about my record and position on racial justice, including busing. I never, ever opposed voluntary busing. And as a program that Senator Harris participated in, and it made a difference in her life. I did support federal action to address root causes of segregation in our schools and our communities, including taking on the banks and redlining and trying to change the way in which neighborhoods were segregated. I've always been in favor of using federal authority to overcome state-initiated segregation. In fact, I cast a deciding vote in 1974 against an amendment called the Gurney Amendment, which would have banned the right of the federal courts to be able to use busing as a remedy. And you might guess, in the middle of the most extensive busing order in American history in my city, in my state, it wasn't what you'd call the most popular vote in the country at the time. It's a constitutional question to protect the civil rights of every single American. And that's always been my position.
So, and I think that that's a great thing to say. It is a constitutional right, I think, responsibility to protect the civil rights of all Americans. So his answer last night after Kamala, one could say, held his feet to the fire, would be confusing if you compare it to what he said there. He was with Jesse Jackson, who you couldn't see, but I mean, that is just so transparent, But let's take a look at what he said last night during the debate. Okay, so she asked him what you all just saw, and then he kind of stumbled through it, and then she made him clarify, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then? And he says, I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed. I did not oppose, and he got kind of cut off, and so she points out, and you have it there, but you don't have to see it all at this point. She says there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 days after Brown versus Board of Education. Then Biden jumps back in and says, because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision. And then here comes Harris with common sense. So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states failed to preserve the civil rights of all people. And him saying what I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That is saying I oppose the federal government stepping in to protect the civil rights of Black Americans when states fail. That's what that means.
Point blank. And not only that.
And that hurt my feelings last night, just to hear any American say that on national television in 2019.
I'm even gonna simplify what makes this problematic for the folks that didn't go to school for a political science degree. Let's just go back to the basic part of that. He has used that same retired statement every time he's confronted with being problematic. I have heard you, I have listened, and I respect you. That's the same thing he said when he was held to the fire about invading women's boundaries and being handsy and touchy around the Me Too subject. And the other piece, and then he goes on to say, but whenever you say but, you just canceled out everything that you said previous to that. And when Kamala's sitting there telling you that she was of those children who were directly impacted, and for him to brush right over that, that is textbook gaslighting.
That's exactly what that is, and I don't understand who's advising him to not just say, I was wrong.
Every political
I was
advisor.
wrong.
Every political advisor tells people to say not to say that.
This is absurd.
That's why last night Buttigieg, when he said I was wrong and it's a mess in South Bend, and some people saw that as a positive because he admitted to his fault in it and continuing fault in it. I think a lot of people saw that and went, man, he looks weak. Because if you say my bad, people see it as that way.
Well, we look at cancel culture and the way that like unfolds. And so like I think personally, even when Tulsi Gabbard, when they dragged her and were like, girl, you were anti-LGBTQ, you were all these things. And she stood there with that bone structure and just like looked and was like, yeah. And I've moved on and then move on. I think that again, if we can't trust you to take accountability, we can't trust you to represent us in the White House.
Completely agree. And sometimes your past actions are so strong that regardless of how you answer, you cannot and should not be president of the United States.
Talk about how it's happened.
Listen, with Pete Buttigieg, everyone, the facts are there. There are race relations issues in South Bend, and him as the leader of that city is failing at that. He's failing at that when it comes to managing his police department. He's failing at that when it comes to his relationship with the community. That's already the facts. That's already there. So whether he admits to it or not, he is not ready to be president of the United States of America.
But I think
last night I just felt like, oh, I'm glad you see what we see. My answer, you know what I mean? He didn't make it worse for himself. He made it better that he's at least not delusional, but I don't think many Black Americans in South Bend ever thought this was the man that has the experience and has the perspective to lead the country.
Well, I think what it is that for some of the Gen Zers and maybe like younger millennials, they know Uncle Joe, who was VP to Barack Obama, the first Black president. But I remember Joe Biden, who was in a video talking about the crime bill and the war on drugs and talking about thugs and pretty much telling Bush Sr. that he should butch it up basically and grow a pair and that he wasn't being tough enough. And so I think that video, that 2-minute video that you can Google and find on YouTube encapsulates a lot of his attitudes and opinions, but you could even find instances that are more recent about Joe Biden's feelings on race in America. And so like, I think he's been expecting to get it passed because he's given us political blackface by hiding behind President Barack Obama's presidency, when in reality, that doesn't, I feel, it's very harmful in social media. They made him into a meme. Yeah. And so it's kind of created this soft, you wanna say something about it?
This whole episode, I think, highlights his political career. It's, a lot of times it's talk versus actions. So he talked about how he was trying to target the root of the problem with segregation and all that. But he talked about how great it was that he works with segregationists and a racist, well-known, all that stuff. So when you look to work with and highlight how well it is that you worked across the aisle with horrible people, what you're gonna do, especially as Democrats, is you give things away. That's the part that they don't point out. If you're working across the aisle with Mitch McConnell, you're giving something away that the American people don't want, because Mitch McConnell does not work for the American people. So if you're working with segregationists, you're giving away something to segregationists that Black folks at the time and any point in history don't want, because they don't work towards Black folks. They hate them. So when you say, hey, I'm working with them, the hurtful part is that you're giving something away. Even though maybe in your heart, you were trying to target the root of the problem by voting against this one thing that's gonna stop it, but then allowing the a-holes that are in the local communities to do what they're doing, you're kind of just spinning the wheels and saying, hey, I tried, but I'm not really doing it. Hey, Black folks, I'm trying. But these horrible people keep doing it. They're acting, you're talking. Who gets hurt? The people do. That's the basis for how long it's been. I'm sure Joe Biden doesn't hate Black people. That's how Kamala started last night. She goes, I don't think you're racist, but I also don't think he cares enough to hurt the feelings of bad people to get things done for better people.
I'm glad that you pointed that out, that it's unfortunate that when a Black American wants to talk about race, they have to make sure to assure the public and to assure the person that they are criticizing that they're not calling them a Klan member. You know what I mean? That is just, it's more emotional abuse.
But then sometimes too, I'm sorry, there's a time when you need to call a racist. And I think this is one of the reasons why personally the political sphere has always been a challenging space to occupy, because I'm not the one. I do not have time to prioritize your feelings over my suffering. That is the textbook definition of oppression. And so I think that, yes, it may not necessarily indicate that he is a racist. However, However, if you are protecting and helping preserve racist spaces and supporting people who have the power to enforce those ideologies at a federal level, then you are an accomplice.
It's like when people voted for Trump, they said, hey, I voted for him. I didn't vote for him because he's a rabid racist. I voted for him because he said the right things about the economy and thinking about the lost guy. I said, so you thought those things, heard the racist things, and still voted for him. That means you were able to let the racist things go.
Well, you're also referring to the fiscal conservative. And so the issue with fiscal conservatives is that they do not believe there's a direct correlation between economics and social justice. And so I think that one of my biggest opportunities has been trying to, for those who are willing to work across the aisle, is trying to get them to understand that the two are connected, starting with slavery as the most obvious example. If you look at American history, somebody always had to take the shorter stick in order for the wealthy class or the 1% to continue to thrive.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.